Welcome to Marketing Mixologists, the podcast that brings together marketing and mixology for an exciting journey into modern-day marketing.
We think marketing should be like your favorite cocktail, fully balanced, flavorful, and memorable.
We'll explore all things related to marketing, from understanding the basics to uncovering advanced strategies.
With special guests joining us each episode, we'll share insights from experts in the field and share our favorite drinks.
Whether you like it shaken or stirred, grab your favorite beverage and join us as we learn more about how powerful marketing can be when mixed well. Cheers! Thank you for joining us. Today we are talking with Lori-lee Elliott, who is the co-founder at Dauntless XR. So thank you for joining us today. And do you want to tell us a little bit about you and about your company?
Thank you for having me. My name's Lori-lee Elliott. And as you said, I run a company called Dauntless XR, and we make mixed reality software for people in frontline jobs. Right now, we're working mostly in aerospace with the Air Force and NASA.
Wow, that is super cool. Awesome. So we're very glad to have you. We have a few clients in the cybersecurity, military, aerospace. So it's cool to talk about that. Do you want to talk to us a bit about augmented reality and what AR and XR actually are?
Yeah, for sure. So XR, or extended reality, is kind of an umbrella term that is used to describe any technology where you insert or overlay digital elements into a real world environment. And when we're talking about XR, a lot of people will use this thing called the Milgram scale. And it's this continuum from reality to virtuality, or, being in VR. So when you look at one end, we don't really use that term anymore. The Milgram scale, I think, was first published in 1994. So,
A little dated.
Little dated, but still very, very applicable. But yeah, at one end of the scale, you are completely virtual. You're in VR. You're in a completely simulated digital environment. And then at the other end of the scale, you're in your regular real world environment. And if you kind of go one notch up the continuum or up the scale, you start hitting things like heads-up displays, which overlay some digital information, but it's 2D. You can't interact with it. It doesn't really care about what's going on in your environment. It'll just put some digital info in front of your face, and then you start getting into augmented reality, where it's that same kind of idea. You can have these digital elements, but they might be three-dimensional, so you can walk around them, and it is more like something you would see in real life. And kind of in the middle of the spectrum, or in the middle of the continuum where we sit, is what is now called mixed reality. Mixed reality is actually a marketing term coined by Microsoft. So some people will not use it because of that association, but for us, it works just fine. And mixed reality is this kind of happy medium where we use a little bit of spatial computing to learn a little bit about your surroundings before we display that digital information. So with mixed reality, I have a table in front of me. If I were to pull up a map, which is something you can do in one of our apps, it would know that there's a table here, and it would put the map on top of the table. Whereas with other technologies, they might not be smart enough to do that. It might, go through a wall or not take into account what's going on around you. So that's kind of XR in a nutshell.
So the differences are sort of like if you're picturing things like Meta Quest, where you're just completely like engrossed in it and it's your entire new world, versus something that would be sort of more slight augmented reality, like how on Amazon you can put a rug in your living room to test the size of it. So obviously the way that you work with it is more complex, but is that kind of like some examples of how everyday ways that we might be utilizing it?
Yeah, exactly. So things like Instagram filters or TikTok filters are great examples of augmented reality, or when you're placing furniture in your room on the Amazon app or the Home Depot app, that's using somewhere between augmented and mixed reality as well. And yeah, also like you said, the Oculus, when you're completely immersed, if the headset's not on, you can't see anything. That means you're in virtual reality.
Awesome. That's really cool. I never thought about how they're sort of like on that scale, that Milgram scale you said?
Yes.
Learned something new today. So I guess, we've had AR for a while now. I remember back in the day it being like Pokemon Go, and obviously there was a lot before that. I remember that being like huge when I first started learning about AR. But how have you seen AR and XR kind of adapt over the years, and what technologies do you think we're not using anymore? Is there any technologies that we're sort of advancing towards with AR and XR?
Well, going from the scale that we just talked about, I think ultimately the hardware that's really going to be the most prevalent will be one that allows you to go from augmented reality to virtual, depending on what you're doing. You won't have to have 3 different headsets or 3 different pairs of glasses for different activities. It'll be something that can just adapt depending on what you're doing. And yeah, I mean, the first time I saw virtual reality in real life, I was working as a journalist in New York, and I found my notebook from that day, and I literally wrote down screens and glasses. So we've come a ways. That was in 2012, and it was pretty rudimentary, but VR has been around since the late 60s. And, it kind of has popped up here and there along the way. We had Google Glass in 2012, which, didn't take. But then we saw this big spike following the release of Oculus Rift in 2016. And really, in my opinion, development has kind of been all over the place. But overall, Overall, we're seeing the technology progress where headsets are becoming lighter, the field of view is becoming better, it's becoming more lifelike, the resolution and battery life of these devices is getting better. And from the software side, gaming definitely led the charge in the early days. Games got traction first and continue to do so. But I think, going forward, where we're kind of heading next is something that has the killer app is going to be one that has some real world utility to really bring people over and using this technology day to day.
Okay, Lori-lee, if I'm remembering correctly, you guys at Dauntless have 2 applications, right? We've got Katana and Aura, right?
Yes. That's right.
If you would like, could you explain to us what those both are? And the reason that I'm kind of asking is so our listeners can understand how AR and XR can be used in a real life application. So really diving into kind of a high level of what you guys are doing with those applications.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with Katana. It's actually the app we developed first. And at its core, it's guided workflows in mixed reality. So when we first, prototyped this and tried it out, we were working in industrial settings. We were on a construction site. But what people kept asking, and I think this is a really good example, is could you load it with instructions on how to change a tire on my car? So with our app, that's the sort of thing you can do. You can put in these step-by-step procedures or checklists or anything that has a sequence to it, and it will interact with the real world thing. So it will tell you, where you need to look for the next step or where you need to go. And then, plain English instructions on what to do. And like I kind of alluded to, that can be used, guided workflows can be used across a lot of industries. We started off in kind of industrial construction, but now we're looking at maintenance use cases for aircraft and upskilling people on the job. So teaching someone to do something that they're not necessarily trained in, but need to be really quick. And that's Katana. We, along with the XR component, so, when you're in headset following these instructions, we also created a desktop no-code authoring platform. So someone with no coding knowledge can go in and create one of these workflows or work instructions very quickly with, minimal knowledge of XR. And I think that's been a really core component to that technology, as well as making it accessible and easy to use. The other application we have is Aura, and this one, it's only a year old. It's still a baby. And Aura at its core, it takes machine generated data sets that are, usually pretty gnarly to look at. And it will ingest them and then turn that data into something that is much easier to review. So it will create something spatial with that data so that you can go in with multiple people and review it. And what we're using it for right now is with the Air Force, we're taking flight recorder data and using that to generate or recreate the flight that an aircrew flew. So they can go in there, the whole crew, and see this beautiful 3D topographic map, see their flight path, all accurate and to scale, sampled every second of the flight. And we're able to pull all of that data down and display it in a way that they're used to seeing it. Whereas, the way that data looks right now, it's a 40,000 row spreadsheet that no one, can reasonably look at in a short amount of time. We have other applications for Aura. It is really just used for data visualization. We just started working with NASA to visualize space weather data. So we have sensors that are on satellites around the sun, and we're going to use that data to create a space weather forecast in there.
That's so exciting.
That's really awesome. I think the NASA thing is really cool. If I'm remembering correctly from a previous conversation, the Aura is what you're also thinking could be potentially used in the education space, right?
Aura definitely has education potential. I think that's one of the reasons, one of the applications NASA wants to use it for is just for, generally educating the public on space weather. The education component we're working on is actually for Katana. So where we just completed a contract for advanced language learning, where we're enhancing people's ability to acquire languages really quickly using some spatial components. And it doesn't seem that direct of a connection that there's a spatial element to learning, a second or third language, but there actually is a pretty robust set of data that says it can, by learning this way, it improves your recall, it improves retention, and you're able to, learn these advanced concepts better and faster, which is really cool. But we're very early days on that right now.
I know it's not even comparable, but it kind of reminds me of when you're watching, let's say, a Netflix show in a different language. I always try to make sure I'm listening to the actual language that it was recorded in, but I love reading with subtitles at the same time and being okay, I've heard that word a bunch of times, and always according to that subtitle. So it's kind of putting that in almost into a real world learning on your feet kind of perspective.
Yeah, for sure. It has that element to it. And, it's not going to replace, I don't think any XR technology will replace all learning, but it's one of those things that can really enhance it and, try to bring a little bit of that immersive, we sadly can't send everyone to Paris to go learn French or everyone to, Lima to go learn Spanish, but we can try to bring a little bit of that experience into a classroom using XR.
Definitely adds the augment to the situation.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how do you think applications like Katana or Aura can help revolutionize different sectors in different industries?
Yeah, so there's a lot of industries we're seeing right now that have some kind of labor shortage. And oftentimes it's not for entry-level jobs, unfortunately. It's for, mid-level or, more skilled work, which is really frustrating if you're coming out of school right now and trying to get a job. So within these sectors, these companies are looking for ways that they can solve this with technology, and XR is one of them. We've seen, you're able to upskill workers very quickly. As I mentioned before, you can train faster, you can cut onboarding and training time down significantly. And then, in combination with other things, you can automate the less desirable parts of the job and hopefully keep people around longer. One of the big things with Katana is that it does do away with paperwork, which I think everyone hates doing. So by removing, if you don't have to do that and it's just done for you, it definitely makes jobs more desirable as well as making, things more productive.
I do love the accessibility of information, being able to learn things on the fly. I know we're a small business, so we're often I don't know how to do this, but we are such a small team. I'm going to figure out how to do this. And having that in a real world application when you're someone in a more technical role where you can't just Google it. I feel like that's definitely going to make some big waves.
Yeah, for sure. And it also speaks to a digitally native generation where a lot of people are like, why isn't this 100% digital now? Like, why is part of my job to do data entry or to scan things or, and any of those kind of activities? That was my experience when I first started working. I was paid well, but I was in a job where I'm like, why isn't a computer doing this?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. If the technology exists, it's just moving it in the right direction to take it to that level.
For sure.
So in AR and XR, what do you think some of the challenges and obstacles with these technologies are right now?
I'd say the biggest challenge right now, in my opinion, is the hardware. The application development, so the software side, has kind of outpaced the hardware that's available. And on top of that, out of all the headsets we have out there, there isn't, one or two that dominate the market. Like when we think about smartphones, yes, there's a bunch of different kinds, but most people are either Apple or Android, right? We don't have that kind of market dominance with the XR headsets yet. I think we'll get there, but it does put the software developers, it can make them a bit vulnerable if you're developing on one platform or for one headset and then it disappears, which happens all the time. All of your work is lost. So that's the biggest challenge right now is dealing with the hardware limitations and then having the time and resources and strategy to build something that's hardware agnostic. I'd say that's probably the biggest thing.
Even with all of the sort of Wild Westness of AR and XR right now, what do you think are some of the potential opportunities and benefits that AR and XR bring forward that nothing else could?
There are a lot of things that, right now with having screens confined to, this little square, we're a little bit limited, and there's lots of there's lots of job functions and, entertainment, like kind of across the board that can be improved when you don't have that limitation. Just thinking about, like what we're doing with Aura right now, there's so much more that pilots can learn from doing a flight debrief when they can see their flight in 3 dimensions, how they flew it. Right now, if they want to debrief a flight, which both commercial and military pilots do, they're using a whiteboard where they draw what happened based on their notes and what they remember. Or maybe they will use like airplanes on sticks. And if you haven't seen this before, definitely Google it. It's great watching, these very, very serious debriefs, and they have little toy airplanes on sticks.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I remember watching the Top Gun Maverick, and they had some like crazy amazing software that they were using to like show the mission that he flew. And I was in the theater and I'm like, I don't think that exists, but it'd be really cool if it did. And that's kind of what we're building. So being able to take advantage of, looking at concepts that were not supposed to be, but that are 3-dimensional, looking at them in their native environment, you can get so much more from them. So looking at this, flight debrief where you can actually see it in 3 dimensions, see all the data in a way that makes sense to you, you can get so much more out of it. And that's really, across both of our products, kind of what we have narrowed in on is, right now, without any more advancing technology, we generate so much data. And a lot of companies are like, yeah, we need to move on to the next thing. Like we need to have AI, we need to have big data, we need this, we need that. And all of that is just going to generate more data. And we come in and we're like, you can improve so many processes, so many people's lives, so many jobs by just using what you have already in a better way, or in a way that makes more sense to the people that have to use it. So the spatial component to Katana, where you're going through a procedure or a training, you're going to be more likely to remember it because of the way it was delivered, which is more natural versus trying to read like printed out PowerPoints, which I have actually seen, and I never need to see again. But anyone that's worked in corporate knows like that is how you are trained. That's how you are upskilled, is with a lot of PowerPoints and stuff that's printed out. And we can do so much more with what we already have just by tweaking it a little and making it available in this different medium.
Yeah, I love the idea of that. It's sort of like a not less is more per se, but rather than I feel like this constant, rat race need to get more data, bring new things in. What can we do that's new? What can we do that's the next big thing? What's everyone talking about? Being able to take what you have and like manipulate it into a way that's gonna give you better results is a game changer for sure.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was listening to the episode you did on AI, and it reminded me of a workshop we did with the Air Force where they were putting together a solicitation for augmented reality and artificial intelligence and all these great things. And it was right after ChatGPT kind of blew up. And all of the consultants in the room were like, oh, you just got to use ChatGPT for this and for that. And I'm like, it's an amazing tool, but like, where are these nice clean data sets that you're going to feed it to train it, right? Like, does the customer that you're talking to have just this wealth of pristine data that it can use right now? And a lot of times the answer is no. They'll get there. Probably not. Yeah. You're going to need to do some legwork before you get to that point. And that's totally fine, right? Like companies take on tech debt all the time. And what's great about augmented reality and extended reality is it can be that great like onboarding gateway to being able to use all of these other great technologies that are becoming available, because it forces you to get into this digitally native space.
So how is your company, Dauntless XR, how are you guys using marketing efforts to spread awareness about AR and XR? Because I feel like this is still something that's kind of in its infancy and needs, awareness. So what are you guys currently doing to get your name out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And because it is so new, a lot of our focus has been on more sharing what we already know with the community and with people who want to get into the space or want to start, kind of using the technology themselves. So, we do a lot of posting on LinkedIn and making educational YouTube videos and white papers. And what else? We do a little bit of posting on Instagram as well, but our customers are hang out a lot more on LinkedIn, and kind of things like that focus on kind of giving back first before we really ask for anything in return. And it helps that the government is a big customer of ours, and you can market all you like to them, but you're not that's not how business is done with them.
Right.
Definitely more about the results.
Definitely more about the results.
Yeah.
So like the tech space in general is a pretty crowded market. I feel like you guys' market is a little more niche, but do you feel like there is a lot of overcrowding and that you need to do certain things, kind of make yourself stand out? Or what does your space look like?
I feel like in 2016 to 2018, it was very crowded, and you had to work really hard to set yourself apart from all the other XR companies that were getting, millions and millions of dollars in VC funding. Now, because of how volatile the hardware market has been and like the ups and downs of VC funding right now, which you want to talk about Wild West, it's scary out there. It's consolidated a little bit, but how we kind of set ourselves apart is we did do our best to remain hardware agnostic. So we didn't tie ourselves to one platform. And because we didn't take outside capital, we're bootstrapped, we had to really focus on features that delivered a lot of value to the customer. If the customer wasn't willing to pay for it now, it didn't get built. And that's not necessarily how things are traditionally done in tech, but it's how we were kind of forced to survive. And that definitely set us apart. And I'd say, the other things are definitely more on the technical side. Like our customers, the use cases we deal with, people are in these very dynamic and changing environments. We're not in like perfectly lit conference rooms. So we had to make our applications quite robust, which did set us apart a little bit because fewer companies, at least, a couple of years ago, were willing to spend the time and money on that.
Okay. And where you're currently sitting, what marketing efforts are you finding are working the best for you currently?
I'd say posting on LinkedIn by far. Mm-hmm. That's had really great results. A lot of our customers are on there, and they are really looking for resources that help them, become a thought leader in their own space. And if you're able to provide, pieces of content here and there that help them with that, mm-hmm. It's great. You get great engagement. And then, you also on the, flip side of that, get to position yourself as a leader in the market, which really helps. We have so many more avenues to do that now than what we did, 20 years ago. LinkedIn has been great, providing, insights and engaging with the community on there has been amazing. And then also email newsletters are a good standby. No matter what you do, I feel like you need to have an email list as your backup. I got locked out of my LinkedIn last week. Even though I had all the security precautions, two-factor authentication, complex password, all that good stuff. Someone tried to hack into my account and I got locked out. And if this has ever happened to you, there's sometimes nothing you can do, even if you've done nothing wrong. Yeah. So, definitely have that email list that you're keeping as a backup. And, this is definitely not true for most tech companies, but conferences for us are also effective marketing, it's a little old school, but it works.
I feel like for us especially, we love LinkedIn and newsletters as marketing channels for ourselves. I love that LinkedIn. I don't think I've ever seen a platform that's more about sharing information. Yeah. I feel like I know that was the original purpose of a lot of different social platforms, especially. But I feel like with, the rise of things like blogging and Pinterest, and it's all become more of like, oh, I'm going to put forth this for you, like self-promotion. Mm-hmm. Whereas with LinkedIn, I feel like everyone's constantly sharing information and communicating with each other and sharing things in their industry that, could even be from a competitor. I just feel like it's a very collaborative space that you can get a lot of traction in, for sure.
It is. And I think because you can't be anonymous on LinkedIn. You can create a pseudonym or whatever, but because people are expected to show up as themselves, you get a little bit more of an authentic interaction. Mm-hmm. Even though it's been around a while, I feel like the barrier to entry with content quality, you don't have to be as fancy on LinkedIn. You can just provide something that even if it doesn't look pretty, if it provides value, people will still, react to it and enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Whereas that's not necessarily true. There's been some trends on, Instagram becoming a little bit more casual, but historically, you need very curated and kind of perfect content for it to do well. So I like LinkedIn for that as well.
In the world of AR and XR, what do you think are some of the upcoming trends across spaces, not particular to one or the other industries that you've been seeing?
I'd say the industry as a whole is, we're really working kind of behind the scenes to make, the hardware improvements, to make more convincing remote collaboration, better spatial computing, all of the things that kind of go into that improved realism. I feel like that's happening. And, on the consumer side, you can see this kind of petering out where filters are getting a lot more convincing. I saw one on TikTok yesterday. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a beauty filter. And you really could not tell that someone was changing their face, because it used to be if you put your hand in front of your eye, you'd have an eyebrow on the back of your hand. Mm-hmm. It doesn't do that anymore. And it really the eyeshadow is really sticking to your eye and outlining, things perfectly. So we're kind of seeing it come through in those ways. If you're not, working in industrial XR applications, that's where you see it present itself.
Yeah, it's definitely more the day-to-day. Everybody sees that side of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the same, when you're using those apps to place furniture in your room, in the beginning, they were pretty janky. You got the idea, but you're I don't think this couch is really that size. I think it's a lot, and that's getting a lot better too. So you're seeing it come out in those ways as all of the kind of architecture gets updated and improved.
Do you have any predictions or sort of foresight and forecasts into the future of AR and XR?
Yeah, so this will probably upset some people, but that's okay. I don't think XR really goes mainstream and consumer mainstream for like 5 to 10 years and potentially longer depending on the hardware side of things. And, that's really upsetting if, you've invested a bunch of money in a consumer AR startup or something like that. But if you hang in there, you'll make it. But in the meantime, I think the applications and the companies that get traction are going to be the ones that have clear utility. Like they really make your life easier somehow. And they make use of complementary technologies like cloud or blockchain or big data or IoT, like something like that. It's pulling those things together. And then something that really meets the customer, the end user, where they are. I don't know how many times I've seen, startups or companies come in and pitch, and they're trying to sell a company a Ferrari, and they need a bicycle. Like they're just not there, and that's okay. Like you can work with them to build up to that point, but just not taking that into consideration at all. Like if you're working off of printed spreadsheets in a desk drawer, we got to do some housekeeping before I can give you Aura. Like it,
right.
100%. And those kind of activities are not necessarily scalable. So they're not things that, especially if you're venture backed, startups would be willing to spend a lot of time on. But if you can, it makes a world of difference.
All right. Well, I think that takes us to the very serious,
the most serious question of the entire podcast.
Very serious.
Share with us, please, your favorite cocktail or mocktail.
So I will admit, my favorite cocktail is kind of dependent on where I am. Like if I'm at the beach, I want something different than if I'm like après ski. But I'd say across the board, my favorite one right now is agua fresca, which is definitely like a beachy drink. Mm-hmm. It can be with or without like a top shelf tequila. So, if you're feeling fancy, you can add in some sparkling wine or sparkling water. And it's just watermelon, sugar, lime, a little bit of mint, and then, that tequila and the bubbles if you're feeling fancy.
I want that right now.
That sounds delicious. Although I think I would do, instead of tequila, I would want to do vodka. But I understand why it would be tequila. But I don't want to do vodka, I think, instead.
I'm a tequila girl, so I feel like I would go with tequila.
Yeah, I think either works. Right now, like, I don't know. I know, like, you need time to recover after having a baby, but I had a baby 3 months ago and I could have like max one cocktail. I don't think my body has recovered yet, like on a cellular level. I need time, but they are delicious.
Well, congratulations on the baby. I didn't know that.
Thank you.
All right. If any of our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
I would say LinkedIn. I'm Lori-lee Elliott on LinkedIn, and I'm on Instagram as well, the same handle. We have an email list, as you might have guessed from my earlier comments. If you're interested in staying up to date on what we're doing, that's over on our website, dauntlessxr.com.
Awesome. Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great to chat with you guys.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. Tune in next time for another special guest and, of course, more cocktails.
Don't forget to grab your favorite drink and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Marketing Mixologists Pod.
Cheers.